Welcome back and good for you. You decided to keep learning for your own betterment, and I'm proud of you. So in Module 2, we looked into a very simplistic explanation of the science behind benzodiazepines. We briefly looked at how they affect the brain and why we quickly become dependent on them. Dependent is such a nice word, isn't it? It doesn't seem fitting. Let's not mince words, we get addicted to them. Like me, many of you feel very raw about your benzo experience. You may feel betrayed, angry, or even lied to. All these feelings are valid, and later one of my dearest friends, Hillary, will help you sort out some of these competing emotions into something healthier and far more sustainable. But for now, it's hard love time. So here's the thing. We can't change why you're here watching a survival guide for a medicine you trusted. That's done. We can't change the fact that some of this makes us uncomfortable. What we can change is the way we go about tackling the issue for a better life on the other side. I know, it's easier said than done. It's understandable to have fears and worries. As someone in the beginning or in the middle of benzo withdrawals, it's very easy to feel fear gripping you, spreading through you. Let's just try to focus on minute-by-minute survival right now and stay the course like the old sailors used to say. Back to feeling burned. Like me, you may be wondering why you were put on a drug that could make you so addicted to it, a powerful, dangerous drug. It's a great question. And in this module, we will discuss the dark side of benzos and why I think 100% think you are doing the right thing by leaving them in your past. Now, this is just my opinion, and I'm not about to tell you what to do. And if you're in the middle of the withdrawals and are wondering if it's all worth it, that it would be easier to just reach for that bottle of loose benzos, this module may convince you to stay the course. My hope is that you will feel that a benzo-free life is a better one and fight the good fight. That ridding your body, despite the discomforts of the poison, is worth the pain. We've only touched on some of the side effects so far. Now we're really going to dial it in, really look at why you may want to quit benzos. Or, if you are in withdrawals, why you probably made the right decision, and to grit your teeth and just stick with it. Now again, I can't stress enough, and my lawyers can't stress enough, I am not a doctor. You've got to choose your own path, but I doubt too many of you would have bought an expensive program like mine if you were satisfied with your benzo life. So let's go. Let's tackle an important question right out of the gate. The question is, do benzodiazepines work? The overwhelming evidence is that yes, for a short time, benzodiazepines are very effective in certain situations. Benzos can do amazing things when targeted at specific issues if they are used correctly and within a proper timeline. For example, benzos have been used for decades in treating seizures and epilepsy. Now, they don't actually stop the seizures from occurring, but may lessen the chances for them occurring. They are even used to treat febrile seizures in children, and anytime you deal with sick kids, believe me, you're grateful for any help you can get. As most parents of small children know, these febrile seizures are not epilepsy, but are more fever-driven and pretty scary. Benzodiazepines are also useful in helping people through alcohol withdrawals, making the transition to sobriety easier and much safer in extreme cases. Benzos are also excellent sedatives and muscle relaxants as well, and often used before surgeries to relax the body. So we can definitely see there's a place for them in specialized situations. In all these medical scenarios, they are quick and efficient drugs, but most informed experts agree that they are only to be used in the short term. The key word is short, as is they shouldn't be used for more than 4 weeks. Some doctors think you should never exceed 3 weeks of use, but as you and I know, they are often ignored. After a month, dependency and a boatload of other wonderful issues can start rearing their ugly little heads. Many users don't know the cold hard facts, and in the end, we end up in trouble. I didn't know it, and I paid for it. Sadly, many doctors either don't know this when they prescribe them out of their desire to help us, or they minimize the side effects in their heads. Now, I highly doubt they do it to hurt their patients. It's usually more of an innocent error. Doctors are busier than ever before, shuffling on average 20 to 25 patients a day through their office these days. The average time they can spend on a patient is just 7 minutes, and just as a fact, in so short a time, they can't address each one of our issues intimately. Most physicians can't research every one of the thousands of drugs they prescribe. At the end of the day, they're human as you and I. Many times, all they know about benzos is given to them from a drug rep who is selling the drug or from a medical journal they read. Most of us don't know much about benzos going in either, especially those of us who have been on so many medicines over the years to help alleviate our issues. You just trust the process, usually because you're desperate to get some help. So you end up like me, refilling this drug you weren't supposed to be on for more than a few weeks, again and again, for years. Some of you have been refilling it for decades. Meanwhile, dependency is growing by the day, and a whole host of issues may be slowly showing themselves. So over the years of research and coaching, I've developed a bit of a benzo hero. Now, she didn't wear a cape, win a Super Bowl, or even run real fast. Instead, she was a sweet little old British lady who passed away in 2019. Her name was Professor Heather Ashton, and her work was simply invaluable to us fighting the benzo fight. Professor Ashton was a scientist and advocate for folks like us and spent decades helping people get off of benzodiazepines. This little boss of a British lady ran a clinic where she literally saved the lives of thousands of people in withdrawals, which I think we can all agree is pretty awesome. She had an extreme passion and interest in helping those on benzodiazepines in her clinic and made a study of not only the drug, but its effects on those in withdrawals. She also blessed us and wrote it all down for our use. Over the years, helping others get off benzodiazepines, she created what has been called the Ashton Manual, which is linked on my homepage for you to study at your own pace. Friends, I cannot stress the importance of the manual or Professor Ashton's work enough. I wish I had known what a simple web search in the right direction could have told me instead of exploring the gloom and doom of benzo forums. In the manual, she lays down in clear and exact numbers how to safely taper off of benzodiazepines, no matter what the dose. If I had known, I would have begged on my knees for my doctor to help me taper off the benzos and not stop suddenly. It's my sincere plea you will all take some time with the manual and then with the help of your physician, really apply it to your situation. Anyway, one of the many reasons Professor Ashton compiled her manual was because she saw the extreme damage being done to her patients by benzodiazepines, and this brilliant lady made it her life's work to help them out. The good professor truly cared for those like us and was quite disturbed at the pain these drugs caused not only in withdrawals, but while her patients were still on them. She watched for years as her patients exhibited mental and physical issues as varied as extreme depression to wild mood swings while on the drug. She saw benzos wrecking lives. Like me, most of her patients couldn't even keep their jobs. According to Ashton, side effects included, but were in no way limited to, delirium, hallucinations, lack of motor skills, increased depression, breathing and respiratory issues, slurred speech, memory impairment, exhaustion, headache, muscle weakness, spasms, weight gain, disrupted sleep, restlessness, agitation, and aggression. Keep in mind this is just the side effects of those on benzos, not the symptoms of those in withdrawals, which we will look at soon. Many of you will recognize some of these issues in yourself, issues you may not have recognized in your life before the benzodiazepines. I know I certainly see quite a few in me. Professor Ashton and other concerned researchers also found that benzodiazepines had many dangerous contraindications that most people have no idea about when they start these things. In fact, the DEA recorded 346,000 emergency room trips in 2010 that involved benzos being used, sometimes intentionally or more likely innocently, with other substances, and in many cases with folks with pre-existing conditions. We will see later that that number has skyrocketed. Mixing benzos with so many things can have dire consequences, as Ashton and others observed. Now, just a warning here that we won't dissect each issue in detail, but let's briefly look at some of the things benzos don't play well with. If you're like me, depression has been an issue in your past. Many of you are medicated on various antidepressants, just like I was when I was on benzos. Well, we've come to find out benzos and some SSRIs don't mix well at all. Benzos especially don't mix well with the very common antidepressant Prozac and can lead to increased confusion, lack of motor control, and mental impairment. Work with your doctor to ensure you're not setting yourself up for potential disaster with your SSRI for sure. What about alcohol? Alcohol is our most popular legal drug, and it's one of the most common substances mixed with benzodiazepines. Turns out they don't play well with alcohol at all, especially the benzo Xanax. When you take both, they exaggerate the effects of the other, making you far too sedated. When you take both simultaneously, your liver is forced to work overtime to break both down so that both the booze and the benzos stay in your system longer. This often leads to users forgetting how many benzo pills they took while they are enjoying the buzz and the euphoria of the whole experience. So users get a foggy memory over how many pills they've taken and how many drinks they've consumed. What can happen is the mixture can literally knock you out, and this is where you can just stop breathing. One minute you're enjoying the party, the next, medics are doing CPR on your chest. As an EMT, I've seen it, and it ain't pretty. Even opioids like heroin have Narcan to reverse overdoses, but there's no miracle drug for benzo overdoses, so your chances decrease dramatically. It's a gamble you probably shouldn't take part in, and most experts agree that if you struggle with alcohol dependency and yet feel dependent on Xanax, to seek specialized medical help. It's a different animal and needs careful handling. Let's look at a few other dangerous mixes. Studies have shown that benzos also do not mix well with methadone and even antihistamines and sleeping pills. Sleeping pills in particular are dangerous, as once again your body may simply stop breathing while you are in deep sleep. Please seek medical advice before mixing the two and have a loved one or friend check on you often. Check this out. Professor Ashton and many other medical professionals strongly advise against using benzos in the cases of many respiratory issues like asthma, COPD, and even sleep apnea. Benzos can significantly make these conditions much worse, in extreme cases lead to death. They are also contraindicated in cases of fibromyalgia, CHF, chronic fatigue, and PTSD, which they have been strongly linked to exacerbating. Did you get this frightening but true information when you were prescribed your first benzodiazepine? Did you get the benzo user's manual that would come with something as simple as a kitchen blender or even a microwavable meal? I sure as hell didn't, and as someone with a few of these issues, it really disturbs me. Benzos have a very strong negative effect on cognitive ability, and this was one I really struggled with. To state it simply, benzos can make you dumb, at least in the short term. A 2004 study found links between benzo use and severe effects on all areas of cognition and IQ impairment. Information processing, verbal learning, concentration, and visuomotor coordination are all impaired by long-term use, and it's really hard to deny it. I believe this was a key contributor to me having to resign from my job, as we discussed. I seemed to forget everything and sure couldn't process or retain new information. Many of you can relate to the foggy benzo brain. You feel fuzzy, and things that are not really complicated made no sense to me near the end of my benzo use. To be honest, after 3 years on Klonopin, I could have barely read a page of a book and retained a bit of it. I get real irritable over this because I love to read. I couldn't follow the plot of a movie and would get really frustrated over simple instructions. My head felt thick, if that makes any sense. Many of us can't do what we used to be able to do without effort anymore, and that in itself is worrisome. Those that understand the benzo fog understand well what I'm saying. I urge you again to be gentle with yourself. You've got a very powerful drug muddying the waters in your head. Benzodiazepines can also affect coordination, and as you likely guessed, not in a good way. Day-to-day modern life can become very challenging while you're on benzos, and it's been proven over and over again by their users. Let's look at driving as an example. For most of us, driving is a necessity, a non-negotiable for modern survival, if you will. A 1980 study found a strong link between long-term benzo users and car accidents, which is really far from shocking. Basically, a lot of drivers on benzos are doing a whole lot of wrecking on our roads, sometimes fatally. You may remember hearing about Tiger Woods' massive automobile accident back in 2017. It was a terrible wreck, and I'm actually amazed he lived through it. And what exactly was in his system? A cocktail of Xanax, a benzo, and Vicodin, a synthetic opioid painkiller. If it affects the coordination of possibly the greatest golfer of all time, it's likely it's going to mess with yours too. Please monitor yourself before driving. And if you're feeling off, Uber can find you anywhere this side of the Antarctic, I promise you. Earlier, I had mentioned how those suffering from PTSD should stay off benzos, especially those on other medications. This hard truth hit front page news in 2008 when many veterans returning from combat were found dead in their sleep after being prescribed a cocktail, Seroquel, Paxil, and various benzos. For you military, fire, EMS, police, or anyone with any form of PTSD, the U.S. Department of Affairs has strongly recommended you no longer use benzos. The reason being that PTSD has strong links to developing dementia, and benzos exacerbate this. When a federal agency is recognizing and admitting it, it may be time to pay attention. It's not good. As mentioned before, Professor Ashton and others noted and studied strong links between anger and irritability in her patients. Being on benzos can actually lead to the exact opposite effect of why you're taking them in the first place. It can lead to excitability, outbursts, and sometimes even rage in otherwise normal, well-balanced people. I think most of us will agree this is in no way going to help our familiar, work, or social situations. To make matters worse, as we try to navigate our complicated world, depression is often exacerbated by benzos. Many of you are feeling it right now, that low feeling, that dark hole nothing seems to fill. My depression before benzos could be bad, but the depression was an occasional thing to fight off in my pre-benzo life. It came and went, sometimes dictated by events, sometimes even by weather and seasons. On benzos, my depression spiraled to crippling, can't get out of bed, crying at the alarm clock going off because I've got to face another day levels. I'm just being transparent. Benzos don't play well with depression, and I and many others like me feel it is far more active on the drug. Then there's the apathy. So it's not surprising that benzos can lead to extreme apathy after a while. For many of us, the drug can just make us care less about what's going on around us. Professor Ashton called it emotional blunting. She noted that formerly normal people had a pronounced and very apparent lack of emotion after long-time benzodiazepine use. These behaviors extended towards their families, big events, and even caring for others. I get it. At the height of my benzo use, I had a breakup that I hoped was going to lead to marriage. It barely even moved the needle on my heart. I resigned from the job I loved. I showed very little emotion there too. I hurt family and loved ones because I seemed incapable of being loved or even reached. People would call to check on me, and I just brushed it off, no doubt leaving them feeling really rejected for their trouble. To be honest, I couldn't have really cared less about any of it at the time, and I massively regret it now because that's not me. I am 100% confident I would have handled those things so much better now, benzo-free. Although I stress extreme ownership, I feel benzos rob me of possible good chapters in my life because when you're in it, and rarely recognize that you're even doing it. You uncomfortable about how raw I'm getting? It's okay. And it's okay to feel uncomfortable in exposing the truth. Start really asking yourself if any of this sounds familiar, if it applies to you. A lot of you have missed out on a lot of living too, and I don't mind being honest about my struggles if it makes you feel validated and seen. You'll likely have your own stories. So do others. Famous singer Stevie Nicks was on the benzodiazepine Klonopin for 8 years and was very open about how for that period she just sort of checked out on her life. You should read her story if you're not familiar with it. She strongly believes benzos made her indifferent to all the things she held most important, even her potential to be a mother. In many cases, benzos can lead to long-term dysphoria as well. Dysphoria is when your depressive state just leads to a sense of unease and dissatisfaction with life. You just feel flat. Nothing interests you and nothing excites you. Nothing is fun. There's no joy, often with a nice side dish of guilt to spice it all up. I call it jellyfishing. You know how jellyfish just kind of floats with the ocean current, not caring where, just sort of surviving? Anyway, it's just my name for it. I'm sure you've got a better one. My jellyfishing would show itself in not eating enough, not exercising, and isolating from social situations. Benzos can make you just sort of exist, not enjoying life. So, we've seen how the drugs can affect your quality of life, and I think you would agree it's substantial. Let's switch gears really hard and talk to moms or moms-to-be. Benzos are a Class D teratogen, which is a class of drugs that may cause possible birth defects. Now, before we freak out, I say may, as the risk to a fetus is possible, but in no way assured. We do know benzodiazepines cross the placental barrier and can affect growth and development of the fetus and may result in preterm delivery and low birth weights. But let's not forget the risk is low, and like so many things in the benzo world, there's no definitive proof of it, although it has been documented in mothers on benzodiazepines. When born, these babies could suffer neonatal abstinence syndrome and be born addicted to their mother's benzo. Then they would in effect enter life going through withdrawals. If their mother was on benzos, they also may have respiratory issues, weak muscle tone, and have issues with nursing. Even if the babies are capable of nursing, benzos are present in breast milk, so there's that to consider as well. Doctors highly recommend a slow taper for the health and well-being of both mom and baby. Once again, I cannot stress enough that working closely with a trusted physician is of paramount importance in this situation. So let's flip the script and go from the very youngest of us to the oldest. There appears to be a strong link between benzos and Alzheimer's disease. As usual, there's no definitive proof, but there seems to be an inordinate amount of elderly folks on benzos who develop the disease compared to those who are drug-free. Personally, I believe it. For the rest of us somewhere in the middle, there have been many who question the idea of benzodiazepines causing brain damage. For every expert who claims it does cause it, there's another one who disagrees. The camps are really divided, and it's unlikely we'll know the truth for a long time before a lot more expensive and expansive studies are done. Many doctors and users do strongly believe that benzos cause neurological damage, but the good news is it seems to heal over time. I've talked to countless people who never felt they'd mentally recover, but sure enough, over time, they feel healed to a degree, if that makes any sense. I tend to agree. As the years pass, the benzo fog in my brain seemed to be lifting little by little as well. I'll put it this way. 5 years ago, the plot twists on Game of Thrones or even playing cards at the firehouse would have left me completely confused and very irritated at my confusion. Now I understand what's going on and can follow along like the rest of us. Now, before we wrap up this module, I'll be remiss if I didn't talk about the growing benzo misuse epidemic and its often fatal consequences. The National Survey for Drug Use and Health estimates that 20.4 million Americans misuse benzos in some way. That's quite a number, ain't it? This misuse can be at home, parties, the streets, and so on. Benzos are now more and more common among street drugs. If you don't believe me, just look at how many rap songs and videos feature Xanax as a subject. Let's remember there are no labels here, and I don't judge. Benzo misuse may be a surprise to some of you, and to others, it's what brought you here today. Again, no judgment coming from this guy. Let's look at a jump in numbers real quick. According to the CDC, ER visits for overdosing on benzos increased 24% between 2019 and 2020. In 2013, a study found 30% of overdose deaths involved benzos or a cocktail of benzos and other drugs. But according to a study in January 22 by the popular Vice Broadcasting Company, benzos were in some way involved in 52% of fatal overdoses. Let's look at that in a little detail. And this is from the CDC. The latest findings from the CDC are that prescription benzo deaths have increased 22% from 2019 to 22 alone. If this resonates with you, check this out. They also claim illegal use of benzos resulting in death has jumped 520% between 2019 and 2020. If accurate, that's pretty terrifying, and I guarantee those numbers are going to be astronomically higher now, post-pandemic. To some of you, this may be your writing on the wall moment. Now, numbers are funny things, and who knows exactly, but obviously in the past decade, the overdose trend has been dramatically on the rise. A popular drug trend now is to mix benzos and opioids into a very potent cocktail called benzo dope or blackout dope. It's a massive issue in Canada, but it's spreading to America and becoming more and more common. Dealers and makers will take a benzo, then mix it with an opioid like heroin or more commonly lately, fentanyl. This creates a powerful sedative effect that often literally knocks users unconscious, thus the name blackout dope. Thousands have died because of this new drug trend, as it depresses the central nervous system to the extent that you just stop breathing due to respiratory depression. And why do they add benzos to the substances as powerful as heroin and fentanyl? Give it a guess. You guessed it. They use the benzos to get the users hooked. Benzos create addicts, whether in legal or illegal forms, with no regard to your intentions. Those who have been paying attention during this module may be starting to understand why benzos are being called a dark epidemic by many in the medical community and law enforcement. What to do about it is not our aim here, but educating you is. So to end this module, I don't blame you for wanting off the drug. It's bad stuff. It almost seems as dangerous to be on it than to leave it in your past. But I can't make the jump for you. And I urge you to really evaluate what we've talked about in this module. If you are in withdrawals, really analyze what we've discussed and weigh the options. Is it better to give up and go back, or keep pressing forward to a better life? I think the answer is obvious, and I and my team know you can use this knowledge to motivate you to beat this thing. You've come this far after all. I'll see you in Module 4, where we talk about possible withdrawal symptoms. Until then, keep your chin up,